The Industrial Revolution was a time of new inventions and great success. However, the non-industrialized countries discovered the dark side of this new technology. The Industrial Revolution was a booming tidal wave of innovation that spread from its roots in Britain and went on to affect other countries previously untouched by the revolution, with the transfer of raw materials and manufactured goods, and the conquest and colonization of non-industrialized frontiers. Egypt was one country that was not able to industrialize. Muhammad Ali, the ruler of Egypt during this time, tried to reform his country. He created new weapons factories, foundries, shipyards, and cotton mills. His peasants grew cotton and wheat, which would be exported to Britain for a high profit. Egyptian cotton was used for sewing thread, medium fine yarn, fine underwear, and hosiery. In 1860, 600,000 cantars, or 26,976,000 kilograms of cotton, were exported. 500 to 600,000 acres were used to grow Egyptian cotton. There were also railroads to reach cotton farms in the countryside. However, the British did not want the Egyptians to industrialize, because the Egyptians were closer to India and would trade there. While Egypt was in a war with the Ottoman Empire in 1839, the British sold their cheap goods in Egypt and forced Egyptian industries out of business. Then, the Egyptians were stuck selling cotton to the British once again. The British would later gain better relations with the Egyptians and help them industrialize. Europe was in dire need of more materials such as palm oil, copper, rubber, cocoa, and gold to run their factories. This led to the major colonization of Africa. European companies wanted to stake out land that would provide them with a constant supply of raw materials. European countries also used Africa as a place to sell their many manufactured goods for a high price due to the lack of industries on the African continent. Europeans wanted to expand their borders without causing conflict among neighboring countries. As a result, they started to create African colonies instead. European countries began to base power on how many colonies were controlled. A country gained more power if it had more colonies. Europeans also used Africa to get soldiers, cheap labor, and new Christian converts. The Europeans wanted to colonize Africa to help them economically, politically, and militarily. Africa became a major part of the growing European powers as they sought to take India and Asia. India was a non-industrialized country that was known for its beautiful textiles. India had a mild climate, so the working people and the peasants were able to survive easily. In fact, Harry Verlust, senior officer of the East India Company, said, "The farmer was easy, the artisan encouraged, the merchant enriched, and the prince satisfied." The Indians did not really need to industrialize. Many countries created trading posts to control trade routes in India. By 1857, the British made India into a colony. They let the Indians have railroads and telegraphs for trade. Instead of exporting textiles and manufactured goods, the Indians traded raw materials, like cotton, to the British. The Indians also grew opium, which the British would later use to start the Opium Wars with China. The Opium Wars occurred from 1839 to 1842 and 1856 to 1860. British traders sold opium from India to the Chinese, even though the Chinese had prohibition laws. Lin Se-shu, an important Chinese official, wrote Queen Victoria a letter on opium and how the British were aware of how harmful it was and begged her to stop the trade. However, the letter never reached the Queen, so the trade continued. As a result, the Chinese government went to war against Britain. The British had excellent warships such as the Nemesis, and the ships could carry heavy artillery and were quite agile. On the other side, the Chinese had junks that were not quite as advanced. The Chinese were horribly outmatched and surrendered in 1842. In 1856, the Chinese fought the British again and lost. As a result, the Chinese had to create a British embassy, allow missionaries to travel through the country, and pay Britain and France 3 million and 2 million ounces of silver, respectively. The Chinese had lost much of their power and influence as a result of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution negatively affected most of the non-industrialized countries. India, Egypt, and China all lost power because of the machines from Europe. Even though some countries were powerful, many other ones lost lots of power and money because of the Industrial Revolution.